Hello, Sipsters. Welcome back to another episode of the Sippin on Stories podcast with me, Mandy Corey, your host. I'm so delighted that you're here. Happy October. I love this time of year. I have been wearing so many sweatshirts and leggings, and the mornings and the evenings are just crisp, and it is just my favorite. I don't think I'm quite ready for the snow yet, but definitely the fall. And Halloween, I love Halloween. So it has just been a good week. Also, Taylor Swift came out with an album, obviously, in case you've been living under a rock. And I have been listening to that nonstop. So I hope that you've had a wonderful week as well. As promised from last week, for today's episode, I am doing my first ever solo episode, which feels a little weird, not gonna lie. But since this podcast has been out for officially 6 months, I thought it would be fun to just kind of do like a 6-month recap, update. I'm not quite sure exactly what to call it, but also maybe like, just an episode where you get to know me a little bit better as your host of this podcast. So I know that there has been a few episodes where I have, shared my own stories and things, but I figure I can share a little bit more about me. So on my Instagram page, I put up a question box and I just had you submit some questions that you may have either about the podcast or about me. And I'm just going to answer some of those. But before I do that, I thought it would be fun to just give a couple of stats for the podcast. So this will be, I think, 27 episodes, which means we have had actually more than 27 people share their stories, because I have had some episodes where I have multiple people on. So that's kind of fun. And in total, we have just under 3,000 total listens to the podcast, which is also just really, really cool. When I started this podcast, I legitimately thought that, since it was just a hobby, I was doing it for fun, that I may have like maybe 10 people that listen to it every week or on occasion, like my close family and my friends. And it's just been really exciting to have so many people tune in every single week and listen to these episodes. So thank you again for being here. I know that I say that every week, but I just can't say it enough. Even if you've only listened to a few of the episodes, one of the episodes, it doesn't matter. I appreciate it. So I thought I would just do another little reminder first to talk about why I started this podcast in the first place. And that is just because I absolutely love people and their stories. And I have been known to be like that annoying person that you sit next to on an airplane. And the next thing you know, you're being asked all about your life and everything about yourself. I can also like read the room, so I'm not always that person. And if people don't want to talk to me, I can pick up on that, and I don't bug everybody. But I remember one time I was on an airplane and I was sitting next to this like old man, and before I knew it, like I feel like so much about him, like how him and his wife met, like all about them, where they worked, like his kids, and, just like their whole life stories. And by the end, he was like asking if he could give me a ride to where I was going. Not in a creepy way. But anyway, I didn't let him give me a ride. But still, we were, friends by the end. And I just feel like that's me. And just a lot of times I just want to know the details about everybody's lives. Not just yours, but your friends and your friends' friends. And if someone tells me a story, I'm just like hooked. Or the ones that are like, oh my gosh, like you have the most crazy story of all the time. Like those are my favorite. And so I just thought it would be so fun to have a podcast where I could just talk to random people that I do or do not know and just hear about the different interesting stories in their life. And I honestly thought at first that it would be just kind of like shorter stories, like kind of just like crazy, like, whoa, stories or like funny encounters or whatever. But it's been really cool that I've probably had more so of like the heartfelt, vulnerable, hard things that people have gone through. which has just been really special that people have trusted me to tell those stories, and that they're willing to like come on and be honest and sometimes get emotional with me. Like it's just been really, really cool. All right. So now I'm going to pull up the questions. So we'll start with ones about the podcast. So I got a few questions about just like, how do you start a podcast? Give us some tips and resources about how to go about starting a podcast. And I want to answer this because, I've been wanting to do this for years, but I had no idea how to do it. And I would see other times, like people on Instagram or whatever would do like a question box, like, what do you want to know? And I would just be like, will you tell me like how you got started? Will you tell me how to do a podcast? Will you tell me like what equipment you use? I asked a lot, like, what equipment do you use to start a podcast and things like that. And of course, those questions would just never be answered. And I remember asking somebody else who knew somebody who had a podcast. And I was like, will you just like ask them like what they use? Like, that's all I wanted. I just want to know like, what microphone do I buy? Stuff like that. And they're like, well, I don't know if they'd be comfortable with that. And I was just like, oh, okay. I just want to know. And I'm so not like technologically like smart, if you will. I'm just not. So I just had no idea what I was doing. So I'm going to answer that the best that I can, which is like the things that I have found out. Obviously, this is not the most professional podcast of all time or the most fancy podcast of all time, but I can tell you what I have done. So, I did get my podcast equipment a secondhand. So I actually came across somebody else who had a podcast and they decided to stop doing it. And so they were selling their podcast equipment for, cheaper than they bought it or whatever. And so I snagged that and I said, well, if I don't have to do research on what to buy, then I'm just going to buy this. So it came with a few mics, and they are the Shure brand of mics. I have since seen a lot of different mics that I'm sure would work, but that's what I have. It's just a microphone that has like the little, I don't even know the terms, but like the, padding thing, like there's a circle in front of it that like, I should Google it. Let's see. Okay. I Googled it. It's called a pop filter or a pop shield. So I have a microphone with a pop filter on it. So I got a few of those. And then I also bought I also didn't know what this was called, you guys. So I just had to call my brother and ask him. I clearly should have been a lot more prepared for this episode, but it is called a audio interface or like a mixer. Those are the two names that he called it. So it came with an audio interface that I can like plug the mics into, and it just makes it sound a lot better on my end for the microphone. He says it just like converts it on the computer to something the computer can read. I don't know. But I have a Scarlett 18i8. I may have said that wrong, but anyway, I don't really know much about it, but I just plug it into my computer and I feel like it does make the audio sound, for the most part, pretty decent. And I have just a few headphones that different people can use. However, I don't use it all the time because, well, a lot of times people aren't able to come to my house. So if they do, for example, I just interviewed somebody that will be on soon, and they came to my house and they were able to use these mics, which works out really nice. However, a lot of the times I am interviewing somebody, they are too far away to come to my house. And for that, I use an app where they are just on their phone and use whatever microphone is on their phone. And sometimes if they have headphones, they'll wear just whatever headphones that they have. And even though sometimes like I get on and I almost feel like I need to apologize for like, it's a little embarrassing being like, sorry, like I have this whole setup and you don't need that. But, yeah, I feel like that works too. It's obviously not as like great of quality of sound. I'm sure you've noticed there have been some episodes that have been a little echoey or whatever, but I feel like it still, for the most part, works fine. And that app just uploads onto my computer, which is really nice. Or I have some travel mics if I don't feel like bringing my whole setup with me somewhere, but I am traveling. Or like I've had a couple where I've flown there or down in California, and I just don't have room to pack all of it. So I have a little travel like lavalier mic setup that I use. And again, it's not the nicest of audio quality, but I feel like it still works just fine for this podcast. And then I use an app. I do my podcast through Spotify for Creators is how I started it. And they use an app like it takes you to an app, I guess, and it's called Riverside. That is my interview app. It is free, and they do have one that you can upgrade and pay for. I don't do that. I just do the free one since this is just a hobby, I'm not going to pay a lot of money for that. I did pay for the microphone and stuff, but still, it is a pretty cheap thing to start the podcast. And yeah, the Spotify for Creators has, I feel like, been really good and really intuitive, and the like interview app, the Riverside app, just like keeps getting more and more updates that I feel make it even better every time. So even from the time I started this podcast to now, like there's been a lot of updates. So it's been pretty nice and seems to work pretty well. I also did have access. Somebody was so nice and gave me access to a podcasting course that they were using. And so I did look through that in all honesty, but I will say a lot of the stuff like I had already pretty much researched and learned on my own at that point. I'm sure I could go back and look through and learn quite a bit of things since then, but for the most part, I feel like just get yourself a mic. And if you're interested, using Spotify for Creators like really has been good and worked for me. And then as far as like, I don't know, the extra things, like the intro music or whatever, there are a few places that you can go to get royalty-free music. And I had to do like quite a bit of research to find the one that I wanted. Or like, I don't know, I still felt like a little bit like, am I doing this right? But after quite a bit of research or whatever, I found the one that I wanted and was able to use that. And anyway, so I feel like it's been pretty easy. And then it was just a matter of like getting started, which is, a whole other thing. So another question is like, what is one of the like hardest things or most stressful things about doing the podcast? And I would say probably getting the interviews, because if I have no interviews, then I have no episode, and I am really grateful that I've had people reach out to me and say like, hey, like I have a story, let me come on, or I want to talk about this and I'll talk about that or whatever. And I'm so, so grateful for that. But I've also had to be brave and reach out to people that I personally think like I would love to hear their story. And so I've asked them, and really before I had started this podcast, I read the book, the Let Them Theory, which I'm sure a lot of you have probably heard at this point and maybe even read yourself. And honestly, that had given me kind of the courage to just start. I had like a few episodes already recorded at this point. I just like, I don't know, it's intimidating kind of and scary to actually go through with it. And so they were just sitting there for honestly months. And I read the book and I just said, okay, I'm going to put out my podcast and maybe nobody listens to it, and that's okay, Anyway, and so through reading that book, I also was just like, I just need to have the courage to ask people and say, okay, if I reach out to somebody and they say no, like that's okay. Let them say no and I'll just move on and ask somebody else or whatever. And yeah, it just gave me the courage to ask people. And I've been kind of surprised at the amount of people that have said they will do it. And ones that I like honestly didn't think would even get back to me have gotten back to me and said that, yeah, they'll come on the podcast. And so that's been cool. I have had a few like no's or maybe not right now type of things. And that's fine. Like, has it hurt my feelings or anything? Like, it's been okay. I don't feel like I want to pressure anybody to come on here. So, but yeah, that's probably been one of the more stressful things for sure. And like, I've had some days where like one day I was interviewing for probably like 8 hours and I started interviewing in the morning and I just had interviews like all through that day up through the evening. And I was like, wow, I've got like 2 months of episodes here. And that was really fun. But then I've also had weeks where it's like, I don't even know if we're going to have an episode this upcoming week. And then next thing I know, someone's like, hey, I'll come on your podcast or whatever. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's great. And thankfully it's all worked out up to this point. But you just never know. And at first when I started, again, it was kind of scary. I didn't want to feel like a failure because again, I only had like a month or so of episodes and I was like, maybe it will only go a month. Like what if I don't have a month 2, a month 3, whatever? I'm going to feel like I failed and everybody's going to watch me fail. But again, I read that Let Them theory book and it helped me to be like, it's okay. Like nobody has to listen. Nobody has to come on and it's okay. And yeah, I still do feel that way sometimes. Like I don't want to be a failure, but I have for the most part gone to the point that I have accepted if there is a week that I don't have an episode, it's going to be okay. And I'm not a failure. I can look back and say like, no, I feel like this has been successful. It's been a fun hobby for me. And if it does happen, which I'm not saying it's going to right now, but I think that'll be okay. So yeah, finding the interviews, finding the stories, that has been definitely the most stressful. Also, the other more difficult thing is I'm not a social media person. I am not a content creator. So that has definitely been one of the more challenging parts is like, how do I show up on social media? Like I want to be on social media, but I'm definitely not an influencer. I'm definitely not like come on my stories. I don't know. So that's kind of been a weird thing, like knowing that I should probably show up over there, but I don't know. It's just, I like to consume it, but I'm not good at creating it, if that makes sense. So that's also been a challenge and we'll see what happens with that. Okay. So that's about the podcasting. If you have other questions about podcasting, I know I've had some people be like, I need to like talk your ear off about podcasting. Like, please just ask me. I would love to tell you because again, it was so just like sad at the beginning when I'm like, well, please somebody just like walk me through what you did. Even if like I wouldn't have done the same things that they did, it would have just been nice to know kind of what maybe some person did to get started, So anyway, you can always reach out to me and ask. Okay, so now for some questions about me. Okay, so I had 2 questions that were kind of similar and I thought that was kind of fun. So somebody did ask like, oh, if you could meet somebody famous, like, well, who do you want to be? And then somebody else asked me like, if you could interview someone famous, who would it be and why? And that answer came very quickly to my mind because that would be Dax Shepard. Because I love listening to his podcast every single week, Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard and Monica Padman. I just love it. And it's actually like, I had been talking to somebody about wanting to start like this specific like podcast idea. And at one point they were like, you know what, you should listen to this podcast. It's called Armchair Anonymous. I think you'll like it. And so I started listening and I listened to a couple of episodes and I was like, oh my gosh, I love this. And then I was like, well, of course I love it because this is legitimately my dream. This is what I want to do. I want to talk to people. I want to hear their crazy stories and their funny stories and whatnot. So I started listening to Armchair Anonymous. And that just evolved into listening to all of their episodes and different shows. And I just absolutely love it. I love that he is just like so open about his challenges. And I love that he's willing to see like all sides of a situation. And I don't know, I think it's really cool. And I feel like it's kind of rare to see that nowadays. And like something I value is being able to empathize with other people and try and see what other people may be coming from, even if you don't agree with them. And yeah, I just really appreciate that. And he's funny. And I just feel like he's my friend, even if he, has absolutely no idea who I am. So for sure, if I can meet / interview anybody famous, it would definitely be Dax Shepard. All right. Let's see. What other questions do I have? Okay, what is one of my funniest childhood memories. Oh boy. I probably should have read through these questions before I started recording. Because now I'm like, oh man, put me on the spot. The first thing that came to my mind, one time when I was in high school, probably a freshman, me and my best friend Sarah at the time were in a car driving. We went to Target. I don't know what we were doing. We had bought these massive jumbo pens, and why were we even I don't know. We found these jumbo pens. They were 18 inches long. And anyway, on our drive home it was about an hour away. So on our drive back home on the interstate, anytime a car would pass us or we would pass a car, we would go up to the window and we'd stick these pens under our nose and we'd be really obnoxious and sniff these pens. I don't know, you guys. So this is one of those you had to be there type of situations. But I'm sure if I was in the car, I would have been like, what in the world? Nowadays, if I saw some kid doing that, I'd just be like, okay, they're weird. But I think what made me think about it is just I don't know, just being a kid, not caring what people are thinking about me or just doing what I want, having fun. I thought of a couple of other times, even just sitting here, and every time I think of a funny childhood memory, it really is just I was just a carefree kid and just laughing and having fun. And yeah, man, it really makes me be I should just be more like that, just carefree and just be weird. I tell my kids all the time, being weird is fun. Just be weird. It really is fun. Okay, so let's see. Have I ever stolen something? I feel like I shouldn't be saying this out loud. But no, I am a complete rule follower. And so I don't steal things unless, Mom, you can chime in if there's a time that, I happen to steal something. I will say I did have a traffic cone in my room for quite some time. I'm not saying how it got there, but I did have a traffic cone in my room for quite some time that's where I would hang all my coats and jackets and whatnot. And eventually I did feel bad and I returned it. So does that count? I don't know. Maybe I should just leave that. I don't want to be held accountable for anything. Anyway, who was my first ever crush? His name was John Cook, and it was the first grade, and he was the love of my life. And I just remember hanging out with him a lot. Speaking of Halloween, I remember we went trick-or-treating one year at Halloween. I was a clown. I was cute. Anyway, I don't know whatever happened to him, but he was my first ever crush, and I thought for sure we were going to get married. Also, we moved around a lot when I was a kid, just so you know. So I only knew him 1 year before we moved to the next place. So anyway, okay. And I was boy crazy. I had a lot of crushes, I'm not going to lie. My biggest crush was probably my husband, though. I had a big old crush on him. Still do. Okay, let's see. If I could be sponsored by any snack, what would it be? Oh boy. That's a hard one, because obviously if I was to be sponsored by a drink, I would say a Diet Dr. Pepper or Liquid IV. Because I've said all those on here, about a snack, and that's really hard. I feel all of a sudden it's all these snacks are coming to my mind and I can't just pick one. But for some reason, the first one coming to my mind is Wheat Thins. I do love a Wheat Thin. Is that weird? Crackers? Ritz crackers? What I really want to say is chocolate. Even though I feel I shouldn't admit that's my favorite snack, but I do love a chocolate. If I'm traveling, I will choose a Kit Kat, a peanut butter M&M. Those are a great travel snack. Or cashews. I love a cashew. Man, yeah, I don't know if I could be sponsored by something. I'm just going to go with Wheat Thins because that's the first thing that came to my head. But that's weird, but I'll take it. Okay. Let's see. What makes you irrationally ragey? The first thing that came to mind for this is I do not like it when I cannot find something. Like if I have lost something, but it's like I know that I had it and I've checked everywhere and like everything's clean and I'm like, where in the world could it be? It will drive me nuts and I can't think of anything else. And I feel like I'm usually pretty good at finding things, like that mom superpower of just finding everything. But when it's something that's like, where the heck could it be? Or like a random, again, like one of those mom things where you just like stick things in random places when you're doing something else. Oh, that drives me mad. It drives me crazy and I get mad pretty fast. Like what else would make me really mad though, really fast? Nothing else is coming to mind right away. I will say if I don't really enjoy cooking. So if I take the time to like make a meal and it like looks delicious and it's not good, that will make me pretty upset. And I'm like, it doesn't matter how many people could tell me it was good. I'm like, I would have rather gone to a restaurant. Like don't love that either. I wouldn't say it makes me like irrationally ragey. I just, pretty disappointing. So those are the two things that came to my mind. All right, next thing, toilet paper over or under? Over, obviously. Okay, let's see. Did I ever have an imaginary friend? I did when I was a kid. Even though, like, technically I didn't really think it was an imaginary friend. It was all pretend. But at recess, we'd play imaginary friends. And mine was named MM for Mandy. And I remember, like, my other friends, their imaginary name was a TT because their name started with a T. So we would just, whatever our first name started with, we would just double it. And that was our imaginary friend. But it wasn't actually a real one. It was just, for recess. But that was fun. Next one. Have I ever gone skinny dipping? Full skinny dipping? No. I can't say I have. Again, I'm just like a rule follower. And anyway, partial skinny dipping. I can say I've done partial skinny dipping if you can count that. But okay. Talent you wish you could have if you could choose any talent. I 100% wish that I could sing. I know that I've mentioned this on this podcast, but I love music. Like, it will just give me the chills so fast when people are singing. And I'm like, wow, they're so talented. And I love all different genres of music. I could turn on pretty much any station. Maybe not like, like metal, but like any other station. And I just love it because just like people are so talented. And I remember my friend in elementary school, Tanya, who has been on this podcast, she could sing so good and she would get these solos in like our choir programs. And I would just be like, oh my gosh, she's so amazing. And maybe one day I'll get the solo. But then really quickly I'd be like, no, Mandy, you're never going to have a solo. Like that is just not my talent. And then my sister and my brother, they were also blessed with these like really beautiful voices. And I wasn't, and that's okay. But for sure, if I could have any talent, it would be to sing. All right, next question. My favorite memory from my wedding day. I guess the first thing that comes to mind is like I got married in March. And so, the weather is not always great in March. And we had gotten our wedding pictures taken the week before we got married. And it was like cold and kind of cloudy and just like dreary that day. But on our actual wedding day, it was nice and sunny and warm. And like, I was just so grateful for that. So I wouldn't say it's like my favorite memory, but that's the first thing that came to my mind. Yeah, my next favorite memory would be we locked our keys in our car right when we got there. So we got married in an LDS temple. And so when we got to the building, we just like had to go inside. Thankfully, we had gotten our stuff out of the car before, but yeah, locked the keys in the car. And we were like, we don't have time for this. Like we had an appointment, a time. And so we had to call somebody else and we were like, you got to take care of it. Like find a locksmith or something. And so by the time we were done, we had our keys to our car. So that worked out. But you just have to laugh because everyone has to have something go wrong on their wedding day. And for us, it was that. And then another, when I look back on our wedding day, again, it wasn't actually on my wedding day, but the night before our wedding, we were just like, I don't know, pretty cheap. We didn't have a super fancy wedding. And so to save costs, we were like, well, we don't need someone to make the cake. Like we'll just make our own wedding cake. That'll be so easy. And so that night we like went to the store and bought some fondant and we decided that we were just going to do like a styrofoam cake on the bottom and the top would be real, it would be funfetti because that's my favorite. And So we went to the store and bought it all and thought it would be easy. Well, come to find out, if you've never worked with fondant or really made a cake before, like, it was not easy. And so the night before our wedding, we were up till probably like 3 a.m. trying to make this wedding cake, and it was not going well. And it got late enough that we kind of became just like delirious, and we're like laughing, and you're like, I don't care at this point, you know? And it turned out decent for what it was. I mean, I was like, I don't know, I was 19 and had no idea what I was doing and whatever. And we thought it would be easy. It was not, but I don't know, I should just like attach a picture or like post a picture so you can see what our wedding cake looked like. And I don't know, it was still fine. I look back at it and like makes me happy because I know the story of like staying up way too late and then like redoing it all and then eventually just like sticking ribbon on it and sticking some like fake flowers and being like, yep, it's great. So that was fun. Okay, there's a couple of questions. My first job and then my favorite job. So my first job, technically I would say working at my grandma's. She had like a ceramic shop. So I don't know if you could really consider it. I felt like it was a job because I was pretty young and I was like, wow, I'm so cool like with this job. But officially my first job would have probably been working at my family's ice cream shop. They own an ice cream shop and I worked there for, well, let's see. I started working there, I think my sophomore year in high school, and then finished like a year after I graduated college. So it was a long time, but I met some of my best friends at that job and I still keep in contact with them. And I don't know, who doesn't love ice cream? And I got to interact with people every day and got tips every day. And it was just easy. And for the most part, everyone's happy because they're getting ice cream. So, you know, that was just a really fun job. And sometimes when I go back there, there's been a couple of times where I like end up having to like take some orders and fill in for a second. I'm just like, oh, it's so nostalgic and I love it. So sometimes I miss it, but okay. What is something that you are proud of that you have never had the excuse to talk about? Okay, well, I would say for the most part, I'm pretty proud of my emotional, my emotional growth in the last little bit. I'm not gonna lie, the past like year or two have been some of the more like challenging years that I've been through, like emotionally, mentally, like all the different lees, if you will. And for the most part, I feel like I've handled it pretty well. Like I've had some situations that do involve like other people and like things that I've needed to confront, and also like had to be honest about myself and like take a look in the mirror and I don't know, just be like honest about like where I am, like with different like relationships and people and things and myself. And I don't know, that was hard, but I feel like through all of it, I've been able to stay like pretty grounded and knowing like who I am and knowing my own worth and what I deserve, and you know, just like wanting to know what my future looks like and sticking up for myself, and like, but also allowing space for other people to like be who they need to be as well, like if that makes sense. And anyway, it hasn't super been easy, but I know I've mentioned in here multiple times that I did start therapy last year to like kind of help me through that, and that's been really helpful and good. But yeah, I would say I'm pretty proud of myself because I'm definitely one that shies away from like any and all confrontation, and I realized that as I've gone like into, you know, my like mid-30s, that's not always the best, and it's not always like the right thing to do. And yeah, so I'm like proud of myself. Like I don't what okay, so I'm a peacekeeper, and I happened from the time I was born. Like my mom said when she was pregnant with me that she like thought of like a peaceful meadow, and that was just the image that came to her mind. And she's like, you are that peaceful meadow and you bring peace to the people around you. And I feel like that's true, and I've really always loved that about myself, and I still do. But like I said, as I've gotten older, I've just realized that there are times when like maybe I don't need to be the peacekeeper, or maybe that's actually not helping the situation, and I can confront some things in, you know, my own way and stand up for myself and change the things around me. And so yeah, I'm pretty proud of myself for that. And you know, whether I keep this in the podcast or not, I know I feel like I'm doing a poor job of explaining it, but you know, I'm still just here every day trying to be a better person and acknowledge the places that I can be better, and you know, wherever that is, like in my home, with my family, with my relationships, you know, with myself, just a lot of things. So yeah, pretty proud of myself for that. And as I'm sitting here, like I did run today in training for my half marathon. And so I would say, I'm pretty proud of myself for that, for staying active just throughout my life. Because if I had the choice, like I would choose to stay in bed and like watch TV. Like that sounds so appealing to me most days. But as I've gotten older, I've continued to just like try and find ways to stay active. And it's not always easy, but I guess I'm proud of myself for that. Okay, let's see. I think this is maybe the last question. All right, what has the podcast taught me about myself? So I'd say when I started this podcast, like, yes, like I love to talk to people and I'm pretty good at talking to people for the most part. Like it is kind of scary, but, I remember the first interview that I did where I was like, that I didn't know somebody. And I just felt like so nervous because I'm like, how am I going to talk to this person? Like, am I going to be really shy? Because that's also me, is like, I am shy. And I know like those two like don't always mix, but somehow like that's just who I am. I'm shy, but I also love to talk to people. And I remember being like pretty scared. And the more that I've done it and the more that I've like talked to people that I've never talked to before, or really like sometimes too, like talking to someone that I haven't talked to in a really long time can feel kind of scary. But I realized like I can do it and like ask questions. And if I'm being honest, like there is a different business that I would like to pursue eventually. That's also been what I've wanted to do for years. And it's definitely kind of intimidating and scary, and it involves talking to other people. And so I don't know if I'll do it right now. I still plan to. I don't know when. I guess we'll see. Keep an eye out. But yeah, it involves me talking to other people and asking questions. And if anything, this podcast has taught me that I can do that. And I am able to be a person that people can open up to about things. So yeah, it's taught me that. And that's given me some peace for things that hopefully I'll do in the future. Let's see. Okay. Well, I guess that kind of wraps up my podcast recap, get to know me, whatever you'd call this interview. So, yeah, it's been a really fun 6 months. I think we've had some really good episodes, and it's been fun. So if you would like there to be another 6 months, obviously, of episodes, I need your help to do that. So please fill out my form, go to my Instagram page. There's a highlight bubble that says submit a story. If you click on that, you can just fill out the form and it will let me know how I can reach you so that I can have you on this podcast and you can tell your own stories. You can do it there. You can DM me on Instagram. If you know me personally, you could just send me a message. You can also email me at sippinonstoriespodcast@gmail.com. Oh yeah, my Instagram is sippinonstoriespodcast. That's where you'll find me. If you have any ways to know for me to show how to show up on there, just like let me know, Anyway, or if you've been on the podcast, if you can't think of a story yourself, but you know somebody that would be great on the podcast, just ask them, let them theory. They can say no, and that's okay. But you never know unless you ask. So again, thank you all for being here. I love you all so much. And I'll be here next week for another episode. I do have one, so that is good. And I feel like it was a pretty interesting episode for next week. So talk to you soon. Goodbye.